You're listening to the Rachel's English podcast, made especially for non-native speakers, where we study the way Americans really speak. My goal is for you to listen to this podcast every week and sound more natural when speaking English and improve your listening comprehension. In today's episode, we're speaking with my friend and fellow YouTuber, Vicki Hollett. Vicki has a long history of teaching English as a second language, and today she'll share some grammar tips and insight into American culture. So Vicki, could you tell everybody who's out there listening a little bit about yourself? I know that you've been teaching English for a long time. I know that you have published books. Can you fill in the details?
Yeah, sure. I'm British by birth, but these days I live in Philadelphia in the United States, and I'm a business English teacher. Originally, I was a business English teacher, and then I started writing textbooks for Oxford University Press and Pearson, and I'm also, these days, a video producer, and I make videos with my husband for the Simple English Videos channel. And that was luckily how I came to meet you, Rachel.
Yes, I've definitely been in a handful of videos on that channel. And you've been in several videos on my channel as well.
We're very lucky to have one another so close.
We are.
I think.
So how did you get into business English way back when that happened?
Well, I started off as a language teacher in Algeria first, and then I started working in Japan, and I was working at a school that had a lot of business English students and had the opportunity to work with them. And I felt very at home with business English teaching because I'd grown up in a family bakery business, and I always enjoyed talking shop, and it enabled me to carry on talking shop.
Mm-hmm. What is the difference between teaching business English and just teaching English? Is it just about content only, or are there other differences?
Well, a lot of people think that it's about specialized vocabulary, but actually that's not the main thing. In business English, language tends to be more purposeful. So it's about getting a job done. It's not about passing an exam, but it's more about accomplishing jobs and tasks. So it's about getting deals and working together so you can finish on time and on budget. So there's a lot of teamwork that goes on in business English. That's very important. So that means that there's a lot of it that's about relationship building as well. So I think language for getting on well with other people features large in business English.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I really liked it and still like it.
But you don't teach anymore directly. You're doing exclusively simple English videos. Is that right? Or are you still teaching?
Sometimes I teach business English students online.
Okay.
So I still keep my hand in with it.
Okay.
I like to do some online teaching because it keeps me up to date,
Mm-hmm.
and it reminds me of the important things and the things that students need. Because otherwise I think you can forget a bit.
I completely agree. I've been teaching once a month live with my Rachel's English Academy, and prior to this, it had been a while. I had taken a break from teaching. And every time that I'm in a class working with a student, I just get so re-energized about it and just get all sorts of ideas about what I really have to say in order to help somebody improve.
That's right. There's nothing like having the students in front of you.
Right. Okay, so I, as you know, teach only pronunciation and conversation skills on my channel. And a lot of people are interested in grammar. And I know that you are a great grammar teacher. And one mistake that I frequently see when people email me or comment on social media is a mistake like this. I'm interesting in English, or I'm interesting in learning English.
Ah, yes. It's a very common mistake. What's happening there is you've got two adjectives. Interesting and interested are both adjectives. We use interested to say how we feel, but we use interesting to describe the person or thing that causes the feeling. So, for example, we could say, I'm interested in this book. It's an interesting book. And it's quite a funny mistake when students say, I'm very interesting in this book.
Right.
Because, of course, they'd have to be a character in the book to be interesting in the book.
Right. So if you're saying if the sentence starts with I am, then you should be saying interested with the ed ending.
Probably yes.
Mm-hmm.
When you're describing how you feel, you want to use that ed ending.
Mm-hmm.
Another mistake students can make with this is, in some languages, interesting can mean important or big, but it doesn't in English.
Right.
And it's really worth learning this ing and ed pattern, because it applies to lots of other adjectives as well. So the opposite of interested is bored and boring.
Right.
And then you've got surprised, surprising, embarrassed, embarrassing, fascinated, fascinating, amazed, amazing. There are lots of them. So try and learn that pattern. Ed, how we feel. Ing, the person or thing that causes the feeling. And you've got a pattern that's going to be useful in lots of different ways.
Right. And that's great, because one thing about pronunciation is we often don't have clear patterns. Pronunciation often has to just be learned on a word-by-word basis. And it sounds like in this case for grammar, there is a clear rule and a clear pattern that you can apply over and over.
Yeah, that's right.
So let me try to think of some of the examples you said. You said fascinating, fascinated. And just to make it even more clear, let's come up with a sample sentence. So fascinated, I could say, I'm fascinated in, and let me think of something that I'm fascinated in. I guess right now I would say I'm fascinated in travel. I'm planning a trip to Italy, and it's been so long since I've been abroad, and it's something that's really important to me. The more we put ourselves in unfamiliar situations, I think the more we give ourselves a gift. So I'm fascinated in international travel and, what it does to your personality and to your mind.
Well, I think you're going to have an amazing trip.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't see how I could not.
You'll be amazed at all the new sights and all the new people that you'll meet.
Have you been to Italy?
Yes, I have actually. I've been there a couple of times. When I was writing books, I used to travel a lot because I would go and give talks to teachers about the books.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, another one you could practice is embarrassing, because if students say, I am very interesting in this book, that's an embarrassing mistake.
It is embarrassing. The thing is embarrassing, but you don't feel embarrassing. You feel embarrassed.
That's right.
I feel embarrassed about the mistake I made. That mistake was embarrassing.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Vicki, what other grammar mistakes do you notice in your students?
Well, there are lots, of course, but one that comes to mind, a very common one, is explain. My students will say, can you explain me? Now, that's another embarrassing mistake, actually.
Right.
Because we can't explain a person. After the word explain, we say what we're explaining. So if we want to say who we're explaining something to, it goes after the thing we're explaining. We explain something to someone. So if you say, he explained me, it means the thing he explained is you.
Right.
And that sounds very funny.
Right.
I guess you could say, my mother has been trying to explain me for years.
Right.
But it's not normally a sentence. I mean, it's a very odd sentence.
Yes.
So we explain, or we explain something, or we explain something to someone.
So the mistake that your students make, which is, will you explain me, should actually be, will you explain it to me? We need it and to.
Or you could just say, will you explain?
Yes, or will you explain it?
Yep. Or will you explain it, the something? Or will you explain it to me?
Right.
But not, will you explain me? That doesn't work.
No. Okay, awesome. That's a great tip. And I love that we not only heard the tip from Vicki, we not only heard the mistake, but we learned how to fix it. We learned the way it should be. How long have you been living in America?
I've been here now for about 17 years.
And have you lived in Philadelphia that whole time, or have you lived all over?
When I first came, I had a job in Boston and I'd go there and work there sometimes. But mostly I've lived in Philadelphia or just outside.
Okay. And we're picking up a siren in the background, which is okay.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of living in the city. I know that I have construction going on right down the street.
I know. This is a crazy house to be making videos in, actually, because we're right in the heart of Philadelphia where we live now, in Center City. And there are often sirens and
buses. You're right by a bus route. Yeah. There have been times where Vicki and I have been filming and we'll have to wait for the bus to stop, let people out,
to fly overhead.
Yeah. Yes. That's just the reality of living in a city. So you've lived a little bit in Boston, but mostly in Philadelphia, right?
Yes, that's right.
Do you have any, like, if you could give advice to somebody who's moving to the United States who wants to know, what is it like to live in America? What are Americans like? What is the culture like? Or what can you say about Americans in general? What would you be able to say to them about what it's like moving to America as an adult?
Well, I think the biggest difference for me was I encountered a different style of politeness.
Interesting.
I mean, Americans and Brits are both polite, equally polite. It's just that the styles of politeness are different. There are two aspects of politeness. There's one which is you want to be friendly and open and warm and agreeable. And there's another side to politeness, which is that you want to let people go about their business and not interfere, so not impose. And in both cultures, they're both important. But in America, there's a heavier weight on the being friendly. And in the UK, there's a heavier emphasis on the not imposing.
I got it. That makes sense. You know, I don't know a lot about British culture. I haven't been there too much, but from what I understand, that does make sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, if you're from a culture like the UK, then you might think, why is this stranger talking to me? And I often hear from my students, they'll say, this American friendliness, is it fake? And I have to say, no, it's not fake. It's just a different style of politeness. So I tell them to relax and enjoy it because it means it's very easy to make friends in the States and to enjoy new social interactions.
Do you feel that your students find it hard to know how to respond to that?
They do. I think sometimes they misunderstand it. And it depends what culture they come from. If they come from a culture like the UK, where you let people go about their business and you try not to interfere, then when they come to the States, then they could think, oh, these people are so friendly, they're too friendly, it's not real.
Yeah.
They can't believe it.
Yeah.
And they don't recognize that it's actually just a different style of politeness. And it's not that one's right and one's wrong. It's that places are different and people are different.
I remember I was with two German friends when I was living in New York. They were visiting me and we were at this ice cream shop waiting, to order our ice cream. And someone said to me, I love your hair. And I said, oh, thanks. And, that was it. That was the whole interaction. And then they said to me later, they said, is that normal to have someone just compliment you like that? And I said, yeah, that's pretty normal to have someone just say, I love your shoes or great bag or whatever. And to them, that seemed pretty strange that this person commented on something about my looks, particularly my hair. And we were deciding what did he love about my hair. And I'm pretty sure it's because I'm going gray, and against my black hair, the gray is very noticeable. And, you know, most people cover that up at my age. And I think he was saying, you know, I think it's awesome that you're not dyeing your hair. And at least that's my interpretation of it. But we had a good laugh about that, about, you know, someone just complimenting you out of the blue that you've never spoken to, you're never going to speak to again. And I said, no, that's pretty normal.
It is. And it's something that really surprises my students. And it surprised me when I came to the States as well. And what's going on there is because America emphasizes the friendly, open, warm, agreeable side of politeness, compliments are a big part of it. Mm-hmm. Saying you like something. Now, in the other side, if you look at the other side of that, compliments could be a threat or a bit of an insult. Let me explain.
Yes,
that
please
sounds
do.
Strange. Okay. If I pay you a compliment, then I'm making a judgment about you. And you could feel, what right have you got to make a judgment about me? Mm-hmm. You don't know me. Mm-hmm. So it's about imposing.
Yeah.
Versus being warm and friendly. Mm-hmm. You don't want to impose in one culture, and you want to be warm and friendly in another. But yes, compliments are very funny. I mean, I've had a lot of Asian students in the States, and they find it very, very strange as well. And I have to give them advice, like if an American pays you a compliment, say thank you and then pass on, because they don't know how to respond.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, there are probably people out there who have thought this has happened to me and I didn't know what to say back. And a simple thank you can be all you have to say. You don't need to say more than that.
Well, having said that, though, they have done some research on how Americans respond to compliments. And actually, most of the time, they don't say thank you.
What do they say?
I know your mother told you to say thank you, but actually you don't. And what tends to go on is they will deflect the compliment. Yeah. And they have various ways of doing it.
I can see that.
Yeah, they might repay the compliment. So I tell my students to say, oh, I like your dental work, or something like that.
So when someone pays you a compliment, you can compliment them back on something.
Yeah, compliment them back. Or you might just comment. So, you know, oh, I love your bag. Yes, I bought it in a sale.
Yes, I would recognize that, you're right, as a very common response. If someone compliments something of you, you might say where you got it.
Yes. So thank you is one response, but very often Americans don't. And they have other ways of deflecting those compliments.
Okay. So for a student or someone who is new in the U.S. and they think it's too hard to think in the moment of what to say, thank you is definitely still acceptable. Would not seem strange if that was the response.
That's the best and simplest response if you don't know what to say.
Yes.
And smile.
Yeah, a smile goes a long way.
Absolutely.
So another difference besides the culture between Britain and America, of course, is the language. It's English, but the pronunciation is different, of course, and then the vocabulary can be slightly different. And I'm curious, have you just decided to go ahead and switch to using the American word for certain things, or have you decided to stick with the British?
Well, I'm married to an American. So at home, I stick to British words, and he sticks to American. So in the kitchen, I talk about the rubbish bin, and he talks about the trash can. Mm-hmm. You know, I put cling film on the food, and he uses plastic wrap or saran wrap. And we understand one another, but we don't normally use one another's words. But in normal life, it depends who I'm speaking to. If I think someone might not understand me, I use American. So, for example, when I go to the doctors and they ask me for my date of birth, I put the date in the order of dates that you have in America, not the order of dates that we use in the rest of the world.
And what is the order of dates for America?
Well, you'll say March 6th, whereas other people might say 6th March or
Right.
6th. In British English, we'd say the 6th of March.
Okay. So yes, in America, we do tend to do month first.
That's right. And I can confuse people, I found, if I do it my way round.
Okay.
And if I sense there's a case where somebody is going to find it hard to understand me, then I'll try and switch to their system, obviously. You know, a taxi driver. I live in Arch Street in Philadelphia, but when I get into a taxi, I say, can you take me to Arch Street?
So you Americanize it.
I Americanize it. The other thing I Americanize is when I'm talking to an automated phone system,
Right.
I'll try to use a bit of American pronunciation, because otherwise it doesn't understand me.
So can you give me an example? Like for Arch Street, you're pronouncing your R in the American way. If you're speaking to an automated system, what other things do you change in order to sound more American so that that machine can understand you?
I think I make my sound for A instead of because we'll do a very sound very often in British English or an R. I called up Sears because we were having a problem with our refrigerator, or fridge, as I'd call it in English, in my British English. So I called up Sears and the automated phone system said, which department do you want? So I said, I want fridges. And it said, we do not recognize that request. So then I said, refrigerators.
Okay.
And I went straight through to the right department.
Refrigerators with that ending sound. Refrigerator.
That's right.
We do use the word fridge, but we would not use it in a more official situation like that where we're naming a department.
Yeah.
So, Vicki, I had, a couple months ago, I had the pleasure of being a guest on your live YouTube show. Is that still going on?
Well, we've changed it a bit, Rachel. We were streaming them live, but we had difficulty ensuring that the stream would start on time. Sometimes it would start, sometimes it wouldn't. And then we had the problem with Skype. I think there was a problem with the Skype call when you were with us.
Yeah, the video dragged a little bit.
That's right. And at one point, Jason, Fluency MC, just disappeared. The Skype call went down. So what we've done now is we've started recording the shows, and then I take them away and I edit them, and then you get a much better production.
I see.
So I think the shows are going to be much better. The bad thing about it is it takes me a long time to edit.
Right.
So we can't do one every week anymore.
Okay. How often are you doing them? Because these are about an hour long. Is that right?
That's right. And I found it took me about 3 or 4 days to edit one. So it's a big job. So I'm aiming to do one a month.
Okay.
That's my goal.
Mm-hmm. And you're still doing weekly videos as well?
That's right. We still do our weekly videos and we publish every Friday.
Okay. So Fridays are the day to go to Simple English videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
What are some of the topics you've done recently?
We did one recently called How to Think in English, and it's had lots of hits. We're still making lots of videos about vocabulary. And so I've just edited one on grow and grow up. So lots of the vocabulary that people find difficult.
Well, yeah, grow up, the phrasal verb. People are always asking for phrasal verbs.
Yes, and I've got some more videos in the works for phrasal verbs. I want to do more on them. So, yes, we haven't run out of ideas yet. I don't think we ever will.
No, I don't think I ever will either. So with your video on how to think in English, what is one tip that you give in that video?
Well, one tip is dream in English. But there are various steps you have to go through to dream in English.
I would imagine.
But it's a great way to practice your English if you can go to sleep and just dream. You don't have to do anything.
So are you saying you can make yourself dream in a specific language?
Lots of my students have.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to go watch this video to get this tip because I've never heard of that.
Well, you can't force that step, but there are lots of steps that you can take that can build up to being able to dream in English.
They can lead you to that reality.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely check out that video. That is interesting. And, we talked about your live class for just a minute. Now you're saying it's not a live class, but it's an hour-long class. Can you tell people out there a little bit about the format and what kinds of things people will learn in this monthly class that you're doing?
Okay. This is very different, I think, to a lot of live shows on YouTube because it is a show. I'm working with Fluency MC, who's a dear friend of mine, who's American, but he's now based in Paris in France, and he's a rapper. So he produces lots of raps that are specially designed for language learners, and they're great for pronunciation practice. Almost as good as your videos, Rachel.
Oh, thank you.
And but they are a lot of fun. And what we do in a show is we'll have games, we'll have a conversation that we practice. We have a guest who we bring on who's got tips and expertise in a particular area, so you can pick up tips to help you learn English better. And of course, we finish up with a rap.
Right. Fluency MC's specialty.
Yeah, that's right. And we write a rap specially for each show where we practice the language that we've been working on during the show. But it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the games a lot as well.
Yeah, when I was on as a guest, we had a very fun game where Fluency MC and I had to identify British words and figure out what they meant in American English, and we didn't always know.
Yeah, we like quizzes and puzzles, but we also like guessing games and things like that.
Vicki, as you were speaking, I noticed one of the words that you would have to change, the vowel, if you were speaking into an American automated phone system. You were talking about the ah vowel, and you said France. And of course, how would you say that if you were speaking into an American phone system?
France.
That's right. And that would be perfect. I think that machine would know exactly what you meant. So France, that higher vowel,
That's right. That's one of the things I have to change when I'm talking to a machine.
Right. So interesting. I love thinking about that. If I was living in Britain, I wonder if I would be able to do a very good job altering my accent for the phone system. I guess I would have to learn to.
I bet you'd be really, really good at it because you're so aware of different sounds.
Well, I do really like imitating.
That's right. And what you're doing with your mouth and your vocal cords and that sort of thing. You'd be terrific at it.
It would be fun to try. All right, Vicki. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy day, your crazy video editing day to be on the podcast.
It's been a lot of fun. And one day we'll have to go to England together and we can try out your English accent over there.
That sounds like a great idea. So, Vicki, people can find you at youtube.com/Simple English Videos, or?
That's right. Look for Simple English Videos. We've got, I think, a couple of hundred now.
Wow. And your website is also simpleenglishvideos.com. Is that right?
That's right. And we've got a Facebook page and a Facebook group. And we've also got an English show group as well. So do come and say hi, everybody.
Yeah.
I read all my messages and I love to hear from you people.
Yeah, there are so many ways to keep in touch with Vicki, and she's really doing a great job covering vocabulary and grammar on her channel, so be sure to check her out.
I look forward to meeting you all.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. And thank you to everyone for listening to this week's podcast. To see the show notes and links to Vicki's work, visit rachelsenglish.com/podcast and look for this episode. New podcasts are released every Wednesday. Be sure to go to the iTunes store and subscribe. Also, please consider leaving a review in the iTunes store. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast.